To order item 1, public access to meetings. This meeting is open for public attendance. You may also watch the meeting remotely via live stream. Item number 2, meeting opening and roll call. Roll call and verification of quorum. Carlin, can you please call roll?
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
Ms. Rano.
Here.
Mr. Kowalski.
Here.
Mr. Campos.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. We can please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Agenda item 4, public comments. Members of the public may provide comment pertaining only to specific items on the agenda in person or via email. Carlin, did we receive any email comments?
We did not.
Okay, and I see no public comments. No one signed up? Okay. Moving on to agenda number 5, we have the, under general operational referendum 2024, I'm going to hand it off to Corey.
Okay, moving forward together, bridging gaps, building futures, and sustaining excellence. So I'm here tonight to provide you with the most up-to-date information on the potential operational referendum in April of 2024. Again, I'm going to ask that you keep your questions until the end because I may answer those questions as we move about the slide deck. So, how did we get here? Our district has been facing a budget deficit caused by inadequate state funding, and the per student increase has been frozen for 6 out of the last 8 years. Compared to other districts in the Wisconsin Valley Conference, we have had the lowest mill rate for 9 out of the last 10 years. And despite a well-managed budget, operational costs have increased over time without adequate increases to the revenue limit, which means the amount of local dollars that are spent on education. This slide is a historical perspective from the 2018 referendum. There were 2 questions on that ballot. One of the questions pertained to buildings or a bond referendum, and the other question was a question pertaining to increasing the levy, which means the operations and the learning. So 66% of the voters supported a $3.5 million operational referendum to support technology in the classroom, safety and security, and teacher and staff wages. Of that 3.5 million, approximately 2.5 million has been lost due to an enrollment decline since COVID. The building or the facilities referendum question, 68% of the voters supported that referendum for a total of $75.9 million for significant facility needs across the district. Those dollars were project specific and they could not be used for operations. So in other words, they could not be used for teachers or other operational needs, for technology or safety, anything pertaining to that. It was just for the updates to the facilities. All of the facilities projects that were approved in 2018 were completed in 2022 and came in on time and under budget, which is significant considering inflation and how that's risen. Since 2012, allowable increases in revenue limits have lagged, leading to an increase in the number of referendums across the state. 82% of the Wisconsin school districts have used the referendum option since 1993. That's significant. And the amount of money that people are spending and approving through referendums has increased significantly as well. This is a slide that you've seen before. We are continuing to evaluate measures of budget reduction and control by implementing necessary cuts, underspending where feasible, and exploring more revenue impacts. So again, at the top, if you look at the red line, those are budget reductions that we've made last school year and will make this school year. The orange section is the budget reduction. Those are accounts that we've underspent. We're hoping that we'll continue to underspend some budgets and have some dollar amounts to share at the end of this year in that area as well. And then the green section is the revenue impact. Those are places where we've been able to generate additional revenue to bring into the district. Recently, we've just been made aware of some additional revenue impacts, so we'll be bringing that back to business services and potentially the board in future months. So we'll continue to keep the board updated. As you know, we also implemented a program review to evaluate our programs district-wide. We look to make sure that they're in alignment with district goals. We're looking at their impact on academic success. We're making sure that they're articulated student outcomes, enrollment trends, and staffing, and that they are aligned with required graduation requirements. So we have identified a total of 39 programs to date, and we've reviewed 13 of those programs. I'll admit that this review process has raised several questions that have prompted us to further explore courses that have declining enrollment, increased enrollment, as well as looking more closely at courses that may cover similar standards. So it really unveiled more questions than we have answers now, but we're learning a lot. It's been a really good process and one that I think that we will continue to do forever moving forward. It's been very beneficial. It's, like I said, has taken an incredible amount of time, but we're grateful that we've planned to make this work a consistent part of our ongoing budget evaluation process. What are our immediate needs to continue to provide the high-quality education that our students deserve, the community, staff, and families expect? We need to make sure that we retain high-quality teachers and staff, that we maintain academic programs, we maintain technology and infrastructure, address mental health and behavior support, and enhance safety and security. Securing adequate funding is crucial for our district to provide quality education to meet immediate needs without accruing further deficit. A steady funding stream achievable through a successful referendum is critical to meeting these needs. This slide shows an approximation of our best assumptions based on the best information that we have available right now. So the operational referendum will address key components of our educational system that have immediate needs. So teacher and staff retention, to fund competitive wages and benefits for all district employees in the face of record teacher and staff shortages, academic programming, to offer a wide variety of academic programming while also working to maintain appropriate class sizes for the best learning environments for our students. Behavioral and mental health supports to enhance and find new solutions to address escalating behaviors that we've all been hearing about and mental health needs that we continue to see in our classrooms. Safety and security to ensure that we have functioning safety and communication systems throughout our entire district. To reestablish a healthy fund balance, we have been spending money from our fund balance to address the above without the ability to replenish. So having a low fund balance puts us at risk of having to short-term borrow to cover our daily expenses. And we would prefer not to do that because we'd have to pay interest on that. We'd prefer to use those dollars to put back into our classrooms for our students. Fund the 10-year facility maintenance plan. We do not want to be in the same situation as we were in the past, where we deferred maintenance projects and then needed to go to our community for a very large amount of money to make sure that those facilities were updated. And then maintaining technology. This is to meet the ongoing needs of technology and securing our systems from bad actors, or ensuring that our tech support in schools and classrooms remains. So, what is the cost of inaction? The cost of inaction is significant, affecting not only our students, but the entire fabric of our community. Failing to pass a referendum could lead to increased class sizes, reduced academic programming, and compromised school safety. As you're aware, we sought community and staff feedback. A few of the notable highlights from those surveys are on this slide. 82% of the quality of education at the Stevens Point Area Public School District was rated as excellent or good. 86% of the respondents in the community rate the quality of education as better or the same as 5 years ago. 70% believe that our district spends taxpayer money effectively and efficiently. And in the staff feedback, 77% of the teachers and staff support maintaining or expanding academic programs, and 80% of the teachers and staff support additional behavior and mental health supports. So a proposed referendum for $14 million phased over 2 years to minimize taxpayer impact, which allows our district to remain fiscally responsible, as well as keeping our mill rate lower than the state average, most districts across the state, as well as neighboring districts, looks like this. So in 24-25, we would ask for $8.7 million. And then in the second year, 25-26, we would ask for $5.25 million, equaling $14 million. Remember that we get about 57% aid back on those dollar amounts the following year. The mill rate impact in 24-25, the mill rate would be $6.83, an increase of 13 cents, which would be approximately $44 on a $100,000 home. And then in the second year, it would be, the mill rate would be $6.96, an increase of 13 cents again, which would be $47 annually on a $100,000 home. So this is a small impact to the mill rate on the school portion of the taxes. This slide is just a visual representation of what we just discussed. So even with a successfully passed referendum of $14 million, we would remain below our neighbors and below the state average. You'll see the state average line is the green line across. The state average is $7.68. You'll notice that this school year is the darker blue, 23-24. Our mill rate is $6.70. You'll see the 13-cent increase to $6.83 next year, and then the following year, $6.96. So again, well below our neighbors and well below the state average. Far right shows the $44 annually on a $100,000 home, which equates to $3.67 a month. And the second, $47 annually on a $100,000 home, which is $3.92 per month. So less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Our recommendation for this board to take action on next week will be to submit a referendum question to the voters on April 2nd, 2024, which will read, shall the Stevens Point Area Public School District, Portage and Wood Counties, Wisconsin, be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in Section 121.01 Wisconsin statutes by $8,750,000 for the 2024-2025 school year, and by an additional $5,250,000 for a total of $14 million for the 25-26 school year and thereafter, for recurring purposes to pay operating costs for retention of staff, to enhance safety and security, to maintain technology and infrastructure, to maintain academic programs, to address behavior and mental health support, and to maintain district facilities, and for other operational expenses. So this question is actually created from bond counsel. Additional documents are in board docs, which show the resolution to go to a referendum, and then the actual resolution with the question that will be placed on the ballot. So those are for your review and will be also in board docs again next week. So the timeline, tonight we have a special board meeting, which you're hearing about right now, with the final needs analysis of the referendum resolution. We'll ask the board to take action on December 11th. And then in January and February, there will be a comprehensive community information campaign and monthly reports to the school board on those events and any information. Carlin has actually already started to schedule those, should the board take action and approve next week, because it's going to be really, really tough. Last time we did this, we had 69 different community sessions, so it's going to be a lot. March, we'll continue that information campaign with updates to the school board, and then the actual vote is on April 2nd. So with that, I will entertain any questions, and cabinet members are here to help as well. Dennis?
Just clarification that $44 in the 2024-25 school year, the next, on the $47, it's added to that. It's
Correct.
not separate. Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
So could we go back to the slide that had kind of our focus on our current budget? The one that talked about how we are looking for savings. And I do just want to note, because this has been a very serious effort on the part of administration, and it will continue to be. But when we look at the orange section, we've got underspent budgets for 22-23. One is early learning, one is unfilled positions, one is unfilled sub-positions. I just want to point out that we did not, as a school district, want that to happen.
Correct.
I mean, we are hopeful moving forward that we are going to be able to fill our sub positions. I think last year we were at like a 80% fill rate, which is not good for anybody. And the unfilled positions, the same. Those are some of our positions where students need the most. Our special ed population, and then the same with early learning. I mean, it's just the reality in our world today. I mean, not just our district, but districts across the state and the country are struggling to find subs, to fill certain positions, and to fill early learning positions. So I'm hopeful from a board perspective that we don't see those particular
Right.
accounts underspent this year and moving forward. I guess it just, for me, it points out that as you take a look at the fact that we have the lowest mill rate and have for 9 out of the last 10 years, and I think the one year that we didn't was the year right after the referendum, and we just moved into second to last position.
Right.
That our district is doing our best to manage the budget and provide opportunities for our kids with less money than the districts surrounding
Right.
us.
Good point, Meg. I will say that our sub-fill rate is higher this year
Good.
than what it was last year. I think we're at 93%, which is also good compared to our neighbors. Beth has been in communication, and they're struggling. In fact, they've reached out to see if, how we're hitting that fill rate. So we're higher than what they are, which is good.
So my second is
Sorry.
just, again, not a question as much as an observation about the importance of us having a fund balance that cash flows our district. And that's what we currently have. I mean, when we get into November and into December, we are pretty much at zero with our fund balance. And if we don't have enough of a fund balance to fund what we need from July through December, when we aren't getting revenue in, then we have to short-term borrow.
Right.
And that costs money. So I strongly support that. My final question is just, we've talked a lot about the funding cliff that we're going to be looking at within the next year or so as ESSER funds go away. I mean, the post-COVID funds that the federal government provided to us, to the tune of several $1 million. So can you address how this referendum helps us address that.
Absolutely. So we've spent our ESSER funds, and we used our ESSER funds to supplant our budget to keep our operations running. So this will pick up where the ESSER funds, went away. We've got a deficit. So, and we got to the deficit, in all of those areas that I mentioned. So, if this referendum passes, we'll go back to our immediate needs. It addresses all of these things, which we use those ESSER funds to help us get through during those COVID years.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just going back to that same slide,
The first one?
Slide 4?
the budget reduction
Yep.
Yeah. So the actual budget cuts have been a priority of the administration and the board. And we've had these discussions probably for the last 1 to 2 years in terms of prioritizing budget cuts. I noticed that all the cuts on there are cuts that we've known for some time, and they're significant. Yet if it's an ongoing evaluation by administration and the board, have there been any new cuts that aren't just on there at all, or are we still examining cuts, or where are we at with that process? Because the budget reductions certainly aren't as significant as some of the savings through revenue impact and the fact that we underspent. I mean, budget reductions actually affect us going forward because they're actually cuts from the efficiencies. And maybe there are none. I'm just asking if it's something that's ongoing, where's the representation of those other cuts that we've realized through your discussions, et cetera?
Sure. So it is ongoing, Dennis, but we haven't identified any yet because most of our time has been spent reviewing programs. But we will continue to update the board if and when we have additional cuts. But we're kind of on pause because we've taken so much time to review programming at this point.
Okay. And can we have that, I know we've asked in the past, but is it possible to have on a monthly basis to have a representation, a presentation of what cuts we have found, efficiencies we found? And if we haven't found any, we say, okay, we just haven't found any. But I think it's a high priority for the board, not only this referendum, but moving forward. We should always be looking at efficiencies. And in many situations, there aren't any. I recognize that, but I think we owe it to the public to say that this is something that will be a priority one topic, and we'll have a presentation, short though it may be, at each budget meeting, or
Absolutely.
each board meeting.
Or business services meeting, we'll do that.
Yeah, as long as it's say, hey, let's talk about the cuts we found, we didn't find any, or hey, this is something we did, we changed this provider, we found a 15% discount, now we saved $100,000. Oh, that's pretty nice.
Right.
Because they add up as well.
Right. And just so you know, at the beginning of the year, a lot of our time was spent on just the budget, pulling
Absolutely,
last year's.
right.
And then Mike had shared that in January, I think, or February, he would start sharing additional information with the Business Services Committee, and our intent is to bring this back.
Yeah, on a monthly basis,
Yep.
that'd be great. And then if at the business meeting, if it's something that you think the board and the community should know as a whole, then
Bring it back.
part of that presentation. Thank
Yep,
you.
yep.
Appreciate it.
G? I'm sorry. I think I saw G. Miguel?
No, it's fine. It was relevant to what Dennis was saying. So. Well, I know you had talked about bringing in business services. Me personally, I prefer to see it at the board meeting. That way it is always in the community. This is one of the biggest things I'm always hearing. And when I first got on, one of the biggest things we always heard about, and Dr. Owens had sort of put the kibosh on, was like, this wasn't a problem just caused by the board. There was a lot of things that were caused by just legislation and politics, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this is a way for us to continuously prove that and show the public constantly. So 10 years, if we're in this situation again, we can look back at 10 years worth of board meetings and say, no, it's not us.
Right.
So I think it would be best to put it at the board meeting, because I think it's something every citizen that cares wants to see at every board meeting discussed.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that it takes more than a month, right, to find these efficiencies and savings, but to, I think Dennis's and Miguel's point, it would be nice just to show the work maybe at least that you're doing that's underway, and maybe it's a continuation of the prior month. But I do think it's important to stay top of mind
Sure.
with the community.
Yeah.
We will do that.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Gee.
I had a couple, is that all right? Ask a couple questions. When we looked at the budget booklet that Tom had made up for us, at the time, we were considering a $12 million referendum and a 14. And the prognosis with a $12 million referendum was that our budget, our fund balance would be about 15 million. I remember those figures, and I think I talked to Tom about that, which is too little. So we need about 20 million, roughly, right?
A little over.
A little over, because we're figuring 20% off of what, 100 million, somewhere around there. So I'm wondering, at 14 million, is there any prognosis for what our fund balance would look like if we just continued the same way we're going now? Will it be bumped up to 20% if we're going at a $14 million referendum?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, theoretically, then it would improve about $1 million to $2 million from what it was showing in the book.
So it'd be somewhere around 17 million somewhere. So we're still short.
We're still short, but our plan would be to try to address that every year,
So we,
to get back to,
right. Unfortunately, it put us in an unenviable position of raising taxes and cutting services yet. Because to get that money out of the budget, you got to cut it someplace. And the cuts that we've made so far don't get there, and there's no reason to suspect we can make those cuts every year. So it's still a lot of, 14 million is a big chunk, and we're still short on the fund balance.
which it's really important that we're doing this program review and budget evaluation, because we're gonna have to continue to do that every single year.
Yeah.
So you're right, and
It's-
it's a process, but it's important.
Even at 14 million, it's not the golden
No,
fleece. We're still got a lot of work to do. Then my other question is, and this has bothered me ever since I've ever seen it. We have the lowest mill rate, and I've gone around and around what Tom has explained it to me about 1,000,000 times, and I'm probably kind of thick because I still don't understand, why do we have the lowest mill rate always? We're not even the state average, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but why can you give some dynamics as to how that happened, and why are we still the lowest?
Dr. Owens, do you want to come and explain that?
And
He does it so much better.
we had a listening session at Washington Elementary, and one of the teachers that sat in the audience asked this exact question and told me afterward she had never heard it explained as clear as when Dr. Owens explained it.
Well, now it's pressure on them.
Well, just for clarification, we don't always have the lowest rate. There have been years when we haven't, and sometimes we come in second. This year, in fact, now that the
Second to
rates
the
have all been adopted, we are the second lowest. Marshfield is below us. And it's a factor of a variety of things that are different from one district to another. I haven't looked at the details of how Marshfield got lower than us. It may have to do with the fact that a lot of their debt has been retired, and they were able to put away those payments. They didn't have them, so then it drops the amount down because they have more dollars available as a result. Some people get confused thinking that a low mill rate means, that people are, in terms of our staff, aren't paid as well as others in other districts that have a larger mill rate. That's not necessarily the case either. You have to it's kind of like apples and oranges. You have to look at what the rates are for salaries and benefits and compare those to salaries and benefits of other districts, not against mill rates, because they're completely different units of measure and are not a good comparison to pick. They're not a very good analytical number to use, compare one to the other. So that can change. For our taxpayers, it's good to try to keep it as low as possible on the one end, and on the other end, try to offer very good salaries and benefits to attract high-quality teachers and have a good educational program. And ironically, we've been pretty good at being able to do that. Are we the absolute highest? No, but we're certainly not the lowest, and we're probably in the middle to a little bit above that. Can we do better? That's up to the board and up to the taxpayers. Schools belong to to the taxpayers, and you regulate the board. As the board, you regulate what happens in our schools. So that's kind of a decision that's in your hands, but I don't know if that answers the question, or
Well, can I ask a couple further questions?
you're sure.
Clarify for me.
No guarantee I'll be able to answer them,
Yeah,
but
well, I was surprised when we were sitting at a meeting and you know, I was again vexing about this, like,
Sure.
why can't we even be the state average? Which to me, we should want to be more, but just even the state average. But then you came up with some numbers that said we have a higher valuation than any of these other districts.
yes,
Like you
our
said, like
equalized
57
value.
Equalized value, we're higher than Wausau even.
Yes,
So that means our mill rate can be lower.
yes. Our property value in this district at the time we spoke was actually greater than that of Wausau. It was close, but the two scales of the communities are a little different, and the number of students are different. So if we have a higher equalized valuation and fewer students, that means we have a lot more money per pupil, and that's going to drive our mill rate down.
So the fact that we have a higher valuation than even Wausau means we can still get money from that to do everything at a lower mill rate, right?
Yes,
Well, it would seem to me that like Wausau has, you know, the biggest school district. Is there no economy of size there? Because they have the highest mill rate. I mean, does that even enter into the equation?
I'm not sure where you're going, enter into what. I mean, they
Well, they have
spend,
the
they spend
largest number
more,
of students.
so their mill rate's going to be higher because they have to levy more.
Tom, can I make
Part
just
of
a,
it DC Everest. I mean, it's part of it that
They're higher
there's,
than
you know,
DC Everest.
the Wausau area has more than one school district.
Right.
So the Wausau district has an equalized valuation within the Wausau school district. But that doesn't include DC Everest.
No, it does
doesn't
not.
include a large area of that metropolitan,
No, it's not a metropolitan, it's specific to
right,
the city.
right.
To the school district, rather, of Wausau. You know, and that's their valuation. There's, of course, there's DC Everest, they have their own area and their own valuation as well.
just a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I'm not, then this might clarify some things for people that are trying to understand mill rates and how they work in equalized value. Wausau conceivably could have a larger population, except their equalized value or their property values could be, we'll just say for numbers' sake, 50% of that of Stevens Point. They could have a higher mill rate but still pay lower amount in taxes if, per se, Stevens Point's real estate was double the cost or value, and our mill rate could be lower, but we could be paying less simply is that making any sense at all? If it's based on real estate value, property value,
If their, in your example, you said if their value was half of what we were,
for their
and they're
housing stock as
spending
an
more, their tax would be much, much higher than ours. Not lower, it'd be much higher. Higher than it is now.
if their real estate was half the value of, say, a comparable piece over here, okay.
Yeah, because then they'd have to raise that amount of money, they'd have to levy a lot.
Okay.
Plus the state, of course, the state would be contributing quite a bit more in state aid because they'd be a poor district. So the way the equalization aid formula works is wealth is determined by the value of the property, equalized value in a district. So if you go below the state average in the value of your district, the state will contribute more aid than if you were above the value of the state aid, the equalized value. We're about a 57% aided district. If we were 50%, we'd be right at the average of the state. So we're close to the average, but our value is a little bit greater. We're close to Wausau. It's not like 50%. I mean, it's pretty close. But they have, about 1,500 more students than we do. Around what? I think 8,600 students. We're about 7,000. So, and they're operating 2 high schools and et cetera. And they spend a lot more per pupil than we do. So they're gonna have to levy more because they're spending more. And as a result, their levy rate is going to be higher than ours. Because we're not that far off on our equalized,
One time they're allowed to spend more because the state set caps on districts
well,
back in the 90s.
that has to do with where their revenue limit maximum is versus ours.
Right.
And their revenue, the state set caps back in the 90s based on what a district was spending at that time.
Yes.
You were frozen there. And then as the state has added increases, they added increase to that base, which means that a district like Stevens Point that was at about the bottom, well, we continue to be about the bottom 10%, we get our increase. The bottom 10% of what our rate was at the time they froze us. So the state froze us, and then whatever increase annually they put on the rate was based on that base. And so our district was a low-spending district at that time.
Everybody was frozen at the end of the 93, 94 school years. Everybody's rate was frozen, and that's the first year. The next year, 94, 95, was the first year of the revenue limit. So whatever you happened to be at, you were just frozen at, you know. And the only way to make up that difference or catch that up is primarily one through referendum. That's the only vehicle left nowadays to school districts to make any significant change to that formula. Enrollment's another way, but they go up, they go down, and typically they've been going down, so that's been making the problem a little more difficult.
So it's fair to say that still dogs us today?
Yes.
30 years later, yes.
Yes.
A lot of school districts, but in your figures, it was what, 82%?
82.
82% of the districts in the state of Wisconsin have gone to referendum.
Yeah.
Because that is the only avenue left to school boards and to the people to decide what to do with their schools that the legislature has authorized. So,
Just a quick,
And our district back
that
in
quick,
2009 and, was it 2008, 2009, Barb, failed to referendum?
That was before my time.
I think it was
So it was right around 2008?
2009,
Like a 10
at a
million.
time when our surrounding districts were
Passed.
passing them.
just a quick question. I know that every district has a different policy regarding what their fund balance should be, and I know the state doesn't give an exact number, but one time, 15% was considered ballpark figure, and then people, go from there. If we had a 15 or 20%, do we need the 20% in order to not short-term borrow, or is that just the number that we have because we want to make sure that we're in good stead? For example, if we had 15% fund balance, would that automatically say that we're going to be short-term borrowing?
20% is the safe number that we feel that we would need to be at so that we didn't have to short-term borrow. Because you just never know either, what unexpected things may come up where you may need to tap into that fund balance. So 20 is what we feel is a safe percentage.
And again, I understand that as far as being safe, but if we were talking, we're splitting hairs now a little bit, but would 15%, if we said we can't afford the 20% or it's just too much at this time, or we want to relax that a little bit, do we put ourselves with 15%, do we automatically put ourselves in a position where short-term borrowing, or is it just less safe?
The board policy says at least 20%. I would struggle with trying to settle on an exact percentage amount, whether 15, 17, 20, because it's not just a matter of cash flow. Fund balance is there for purposes other than just cash flow. It's there for emergencies when something comes up, et cetera. So if you say, well, we just want to maintain 17.5%, that's really not, at least 20% gives you enough for cash flow, plus a little coverage in case something happens. You need to pull up $1 million or $2 million, all of a sudden you got a roof problem, or God forbid, you have a fire somewhere and you need to replace things, because our insurance does not pay 100% of everything.
Right.
We have $10,000 deductibles when there's incidences, so if we were to have 10 incidents in 1 year, that could be $100,000 right there. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we do need to rebuild our fund balance, and we need to do that consistently and slowly. We're not gonna do it all at once. Keep in mind that each year, costs increased.
Right.
So that 20% is of a larger number.
Right.
It's not frozen.
What number is that figured off of?
See, you can figure it either off of the expenditure totals or the revenue totals. It just gives you a different number.
Because
But
they're a little over 100 million.
if you're
right?
balanced, they'd be the same number, but, yeah, but the point being that as costs go up, the budgets, go up every year. So a fixed percent, like pick 20%, that number goes up also because the budget goes up. And if you don't try to keep up with it, your percent of fund balance shrinks. So it's a constant challenge.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see that there's one thing in the plan is to fund 1.5 million, reestablish a healthy fund balance. That's what that's for, and that'll get us
Slowly
closer. But that's each year, hopefully we pull in. I was surprised to learn from you that there are school districts that have no fund balance in the state of Wisconsin.
That have what?
No fund balance?
There are some that have no, and there is no fund balance, and there are some districts that have 70% or 80%. Yeah.
What would be the reason?
Why would they have that high? That was the policy of their board. If they needed to buy land, they could buy it. If they needed to rebuild a building, they can rebuild it. They had the financial strength to do that. And
What would be an example of a district like that?
an example, Bayfield probably is
Really?
one.
Because of high property values?
Uh,
'Cause they don't have
Yeah,
any-
high property values, plus they have some federal monies coming in from a variety of purposes, and I don't know if they still have it. I knew they had a very high one at one time, but there are districts with very high fund balances.
And you said, was it Milwaukee doesn't have a fund balance?
I
Is that
don't
right?
remember that off the top of my head, no. I was in a district one time that had no fund balance, and it was very, very difficult. We borrowed money every year. We borrowed money for 13 months at a time. It's called short-term borrowing, but it involved a lot of paperwork, and I had to borrow around $8 million every single year, $5 to $8 million, until we built that fund balance up.
Though I see the Morris Leatherman survey that we had indicated that there was support for the 14 million,
Correct.
67%, I think it was, of responders from the district.
Yep.
And about the same from staff.
Correct.
Bill?
Yeah, I have a question on the plan slide, just looking at the 14 million and how we spread that out here.
Yep.
Would you be able to give some information or background on the behavioral and mental health supports, the $2 million? I'm a big fan of, and definitely think we need support for that. Just the number kind of was a staggering amount of money. I'm just running just rough generic numbers. You're talking, 7,100 kids, that's $281 a kid, or 25% of people needing help. It's over $1,100 per pupil. I'm just trying to understand. That's a huge number. What is it for? What are we doing with that?
Yeah, so right now, we're working on trying to address the needs specifically with students struggling with mental health within the classroom. But we don't have a great comprehensive plan on how we're gonna do that. We've got a few students that we're sending outside of the district that we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on each year because we don't have specialized programming internally. So I think that we could potentially somehow come up with a more comprehensive plan that not only meets students that are having, not as significant concerns, but then also students that we are sending elsewhere, and that's gonna take staff, it's gonna take, potentially an off-site location internally. So there's just a whole venue of different ideas and approaches. I will share that we're also communicating with local organizations to help support that, and we've got people that have committed dollars that you'll hear about soon that are willing to support this work. So I'm excited about that. People understand, the United Way of Portage County, for example, I mean, they're sending staff members, mental health providers into our 6 buildings right now, I think. United Way has supported this work. So it's a multitude, Miguel, of different thoughts and ideas, but a more comprehensive plan with potentially some pretty specialized programming.
A couple of questions on that, and this isn't for now, but just to think about. I'd like to, at some point in time, get some clarity on, like, what kind of mental health issues are we actually talking about? I mean, everybody around the globe talks about this, but I really, as much as I've spent on this, as much as it's talked about, no one's really talking about what exactly are we talking about here? Like, mental health is a really broad term. What does that even mean? Because when I've got a $2 million figure in front of me, I mean, I need to know, obviously we can't talk about who, but we do need to know, like, what does that even mean? And then, and I think it's important because isn't there some role that private insurance plays in this on some level? And if not at all, then that's part of the problem, is that I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that are like, I'm thinking mental health. I'm thinking, like, most of the major employers in town have insurance. It's provided to them at a cost, and they have mental health for the entire family. So, like, as a citizen, I'm like wondering, is this all the schools' issue? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars spent by local organizations that may have access to this already, but everybody's footing the bill potentially. We don't know, because I don't know what mental health means. Like, give us examples. I think that needs to be something addressed over this next year.
Sure.
But it'd have to be board approved anyway. However that money is spent, you're gonna bring it to us.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and some of that money, it might be, maybe to improve mental health, we have, dare I say, lower class sizes, and that some of that money might be used for that in terms of helping with the mental health, because, it's not all clinical.
Right.
So, and I don't know your specific plan, and obviously we haven't developed it yet, but the bottom line is however we spend that money, it comes to the board, and the board can give input on whether they think that's appropriate or not.
Right.
But I will say that there are literally hundreds and hundreds and not thousands of families who do not have that full health care. They're not working for those employees, and they don't have access to it. And unfortunately, those young people with those high needs are coming to our schools, and in the past they were kind of like little islands. And I think it is really great that as a society we understand that is a huge impact upon not only young people but the families and the community. So, but I think you're right. We have to kind of define what is the problem.
Yeah, we need.
What is the problem, and how are we going to serve it within schools, and how are we going to make sure that we're not, all just doing the same thing over and over again? Because when there is other resources, how that's factored in?
You're right, Miguel, though it is a community problem. It's not just a school problem. And some of the people that we've talked to know that the students that we're dealing with that have mental health problems are their employees' children and potentially their future, employees. So they know it's a community issue, and they're willing to support the work that we need to do with students.
Good point, though.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and just to know what that means, so we're not duplicating efforts, right, with the community. Yeah,
Agreed.
and then in this bucket, there is a whole behavioral component piece, right, which we
Yes.
see day to day in the classrooms too, so.
Yeah, and I think, Miguel, to sort of maybe tie up this conversation in terms of what is that, I think as Corey alluded to, it really would include staffing, it would potentially include facilities for providing our own on-site treatment for students with chronic and frequent and severe or significant mental health or behavioral needs. I think the other piece of that $2 million would certainly be professional development to build capacity for staff across the district. And I think, your point around family access to support for mental health needs outside of the school environment, I think one thing that we've realized is many families are getting that support through private insurance, but the work of behavior specialists or mental health specialists in the school environment allows us the support we need to be able to adapt the classroom and the school environment to meet the needs of those students with really significant needs. And I think that's where we're seeing the increase, and that's where some staff are feeling ill-equipped in terms of how do I adapt this experience or this environment to be able to effectively meet the needs of those students. So some of that learning certainly is a priority in that $2 million line item.
And I think, and I won't go any further than this, but, and all of this is what I think needs to be line itemed out.
Yep.
Because that's a massive number. I look at teacher and staff retention at 4 million, and then you go down to 2 million, that 50% of that, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. My most important goal is to take care of our teachers, which are helping these individuals. That's a huge sum of money. So I'd like to, and to your point, is some of that might be staff. Well, great. But I'm not seeing that in that number. I'm seeing 4 million talking about teachers and staff.
Right.
So I think that needs to be line itemed as we move along this journey this next year.
So we also have, we clearly have a general budget, and we have a special ed budget. And we have a special ed budget that, again, is a budget that has been significantly underfunded by the state forever. I think this past year, it was like a $12 million transfer from general fund into the special ed budget to support those costs, and we are required to do that. So my question is, is something within that behavioral and mental health also addressing what we're seeing as a district, which is those increasing costs for special ed kids who also have special needs, whether they be behavioral, mental health, or the one-on-one sometimes attention that they need.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's another just very big pressure on our budget that just has continued to grow.
I'm assuming that if there's private insurance available, we want families to access that first,
Absolutely.
so we check that out. The one thing that dogs me about this is when I look at this just on the surface, I'm thinking 14 million, we need that money, it's gonna all be put to good use, but 5 million is just gonna go poof, because we're gonna pay our past debts. So it's not all there. So when I look at 4 million for retention, 3 million for academic program, that's all been spent already.
Right, the
Lot of
5
it.
million deficit is embedded within those dollars.
So that's really not gonna enhance the things it's supposed to enhance as much as it looks like.
Right. Correct, but if we don't pass a referendum, we're gonna be in a
Well, yeah.
really bad
That
place.
points to that even further.
yes.
Teacher and staff retention of $4 million there, are we gonna, given the 5 million that's gonna go bye-bye right away, are we in a position to offer a real raise?
Well,
Not CPI, but a real raise.
we don't know that yet. Our intent is to bring a recommendation to the board after we just figure out what happens with the referendum, if
Yeah.
you choose to put that on the ballot next week. So we're thinking April sometime. Tom and Beth and I have been working on that all year. So we'll be prepared to bring that in April. So it really depends. But we want, and we know that we need to remain competitive if we're gonna keep the great staff that we have, and if we're gonna have, staff wanna come to Point to work. So we need to continue to do that. And our kids deserve that. They deserve high-quality staff teaching them every single day.
Any other questions or comments?
Just thank you. This is, I appreciate leadership of both the business department and in you in terms of putting this together and making it, very easy to understand. And so we'll look at it next week, but we do appreciate it.
Thank you. So just expect there will be information next week, and that will be to ask you to allow us to put the question on the ballot in April. If you have any questions between now and then, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, quick. How much flexibility is there, like each of those areas? I know those are just
Those are approximates.
those are approximate numbers, but as we go through the process and maybe some refining, it may be that we can shift money from one area to
Yes.
another area. And maybe we build up the fund balance at a different rate than what, we're proposing and trying to hit those priorities, but
Yep.
those aren't hard
No.
numbers.
They are not.
This is just a first pass, and
the-
then we'll continue to refresh
The
as
best
needed.
information, yeah. that
They
we
become
have.
hard numbers once they go into the referendum
No.
presentation, just the amount is.
We wrote the question to allow us for
Good.
flexibility.
All right, thank you, that's excellent.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, future meetings, dates and times. We have, next week, we have our regular school board meeting. And then on January 8th, 2024, we have another regular board meeting. As a reminder, Ed Services Committee meets on the first Monday of every month at 5:30. Business Services and HR Committee meet the first Monday of every month at 6:30. So at this point, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Dennis.
Second.
Second by Miguel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks,
Merry Christmas,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.